you say, and please stop me when I'm making a mistake. You can only have reason, truth, logic, if you presuppose God.
Sounds good so far.
So there are some possible answers there. One is no, they can ground themselves. Two is no, they can be grounded by something else. Or three is actually the triune God can't ground them at all.
Okay, I'm all ears. Which one do you prefer?
I mean, if we have 20 minutes, we can go for each of them.
Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, if I can say they can just ground themselves. I mean, I think you've said it in an earlier conversation. They do justify themselves. If I say the law of identity, A equals A, it's impossible for A to not be A.
Mm-hmm.
Or say it in another way, there is no possible world in which A is not A.
Yeah, I believe that because I'm a Christian. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Why?
I believe that explains itself. I
Why?
don't see how God comes in there.
Why do you believe it?
Because if A is not A, I mean, there's no need for God to come in there to make that true.
Why?
It's just true.
Why do you believe that it's true? Flesh that out for me. Why do you believe it?
I have no option.
How do you know you don't have an option?
No, I'm just saying it explains itself.
How do you know that?
Well, I mean that's the end of the sentence.
So just trust me, bro?
No, just try it. See if you can have an A and a not A at the same time.
I know that you can't. I'm asking, how do you? So let's see if we can make this a little bit more entertaining and hopefully get down to a little bit more a bedrock of the argument here.
Oh yeah.
Okay. What you're doing is you're making a pronouncement about all of reality. How do you have access to a conclusion or a belief or a truth statement about all of reality? Have you experienced all of reality? Do you know all things?
And that's when we get to part 2, I think, which is the more interesting one.
So the answer is, of course, no.
I have not experienced all of reality, no.
Okay, but and do you have revelation from someone who has?
No.
Okay, so you don't know all things, and you don't believe that you have revelation or knowledge from someone who does know all things. So could you be wrong about everything that you think that you know?
Yes.
Okay, including the law of identity.
Possibly. Yes.
Okay, so there you go. So you don't actually know the law of identity given your worldview. But there's a problem there because earlier you told me that you do. So you do and you don't know it? That seems like a contradiction.
I can know it without being certain of it, but that's not entirely the point I'm making.
But it's a pretty important point.
Oh, yes, I agree. That's why I'm calling in and not just saying, no, you're wrong.
Okay. All right, so we can put a pin in that because we might need to talk about whether certainty is required for knowledge. But you earlier, you didn't say you could be wrong about it. You said that you knew that the law of identity is absolutely true. You said, just try it. In other words, this is self-evidently true. Now you're saying you could be wrong about it. And that's a huge difference. To go from 100% certainty to anything less than that is an infinite gap. It's the difference between 0 and 1, really. It's an infinite gap. Because now all of a sudden, if you could be wrong about the law of identity, what else could you be wrong about? Because everything hinges on that. So, but anyway, go on. Did I lose you? Can't hear you. Okay, Philosopheric, now you put me in the awkward situation where I have to fill airtime.
He's still here.
He's still here.
Hello.
There you are.
Sorry, I think I muted myself.
No problem.
For which I apologize.
I thought maybe you were just being a good, thoughtful continental philosopher and just.
I'm trying to be.
Yes. Go on. Okay, continue.
What was the last thing you heard?
Well, so the last thing that I heard was myself saying that if you're wrong about the law of identity, because you said that you were certain about it, but now you could be wrong about it. That's a huge problem, I think, for any worldview, because now suddenly, contradictions can be okay. And what is that? Where does that leave us? And so
all right.
I want to know how you know any of this stuff, but you've already said that you can't know it for certain. So we have to talk about that.
I have never said that I am certain about any of these. That's not what I said. And I don't think certainty is required in order to have knowledge.
Why not?
Why is it? I mean, why do you have to be certain about anything in order for you to know it to be true?
Well, because if you're not certain, there could be some fact out there that contradicts what you think you know, and then
exactly
you have a belief. But what is knowledge? How do you define knowledge?
Knowledge, I think, is something. Well, it's a proposition that we can test. Let's see. My favorite way to say it would be knowledge is a proposition that comports to reality. I think it's what people say.
It's a proposition that comports to reality. I might say that sounds more like a correspondence theory of truth.
In a way.
Yeah, but isn't there something that is necessary when it comes to this proposition? Don't you have to believe it for it to be knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. And doesn't that belief also have to be justified or warranted?
Yes, but I don't think that justification has to be 100%.
Okay, so why is that? Why is that?
What do you mean?
Well, there's a belief, but if your worldview gets you to the point where you actually can't be certain about anything, you can't be certain about anything whatsoever, then don't you at that point have a radical undercutting defeater for anything that you think that you know? Aren't you left with total and complete?
There is an assumption there.
Go ahead.
There's a claim in there, and I wanted to discuss this topic, yes, but I mostly wanted to go back to logic. If you
That's
don't
fine.
mind.
We can go back to logic. Let's go back to logic.
Yeah,
8 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to be clear, there is knowledge is not a binary. It's not either you know nothing or you know absolutely for certain.
I don't. Why do you think that? And could you be wrong about it?
I could be wrong. Yes.
Okay.
But
So
in this, if I'm wrong, I could go from 99% certainty to 80% certainty.
And how do you gauge the percentage? What's that percentage?
That will be a discussion for another time. I should think.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're opening up a huge can of worms, because we really at some point we need to talk about whether or not you have to know some things for certain in order to have any kind of belief, even first tier or second tier beliefs. That's hugely important. I'm okay with there being certain things that are called knowledge, like on an infallibilist type scheme, on a fallibilist type epistemology, but you have to, those fallible beliefs have to be grounded and rooted in infallible beliefs, or you're left with radical uncertainty about everything. You can't even know that you don't know certain things, and it devolves into complete and total, mental chaos.
I disagree with just about everything you just said, but that's fine. That's not what I'm calling.
Okay. Well, let's get down to logic, because time is ticking away.
The second option to ground logic is to ground it in something else. I said.
Yeah.
So how do we know? How do we know these laws of logic? Well, we've never seen something that is both A3 and not A3.
Well, the laws of logic would fall into that category.
Exactly. So in that way, we can deduce the laws of logic from reality.
How? In what sense?
Just by looking around, seeing. Well, I'm. You can probably hear I'm outdoors. I'm looking at a tree.
Yeah.
And I can tell it's not a tree. I mean, it's not a tree.
Oh, okay.
Therefore, A equals A.
Okay, so you're
in
presupposing the
order,
laws of logic, and you're using them to justify your observational skills and sense experience, and then you're using the
yes,
sense experience to go back and justify your laws of logic, right?
there is another point to this, which is if the laws of logic are grounded by God, then they are necessarily unchanging. I think you used the word authoritative, normative.
Mhm.
So if we can find an example of something breaking the laws of logic, or bending them, or not following them in any way, then can they still be grounded by God?
Well, of course, but then they would be in a different category. They would be more along the lines of a natural law, like the law of gravity or something like that. But
Right.
laws presuppose a lawgiver. And in order to
Right.
break the laws of logic, you'd have to presuppose them. So the laws of logic are not they do exist necessarily. They aren't the kind of thing that can be broken without presupposing them anyway, without assuming them. So, I mean, you're welcome to try, but you haven't taken God out of the equation, because your argument is going to presuppose the laws of logic, which do have the attributes which require God or presuppose God. And again, remember,
This is
the argument is God, therefore logic. So what you have to do is you have to show why your atheistic worldview. Are you an atheist? I'm sorry, I don't want to assume. I forget.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so you'd have to say, because godless universe, therefore logic. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I also it's begging the question a bit, but that's not important.
I think it's important.
The point is, if God grounds the laws of logic, they must be necessary, unchanging, authoritative, normative. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, they would be authoritative, immaterial, unchanging, universal in scope. They would be objective, meaning not grounded in your mind or any other subjective mind.
Right.
They would be 3 in 1, true in all possible worlds, knowable to us, like revealed by discovery, not created by us through convention.
If we can find an example of something that does not follow those laws of logic, wherein something is both A and not A, does that show that they are in fact not unchanging?
That would show that whatever you're talking about would not be governed by the laws of logic. No such example can exist. But if you want to say that you've found one, that's okay. But again, that wouldn't eliminate the necessity for God grounding logic. And I want to make this very clear.
Why not?
Because in your argument to show that, you'd have to presuppose the laws of logic, which still have all of those attributes that I just went through, that and therefore must be grounded by God. Like my worldview would still ground the laws of logic that you are assuming even as you make your argument. But go ahead, but provide the example.
Well, no, I want to get this clear, because if these laws of logic are not unchanging, necessary, transcendent, then how can they be grounded by God? So therefore, if I show a counterexample, how can you still say that it's unchanging?
Well, it's a good question. It's because what I would say is that they're grounded by God in a different way. For example, the law of gravity, which I mentioned, or the principle of inertia, or the second law of thermodynamics. These are constants in the universe, or the speed of light. These are constants, laws in the universe, which might have been otherwise. They're contingent. We can imagine a possible world in which they operate differently and there's no contradiction, there's no problem. But those laws are still consistent because of God. So in that case, the laws of logic would fall into the category of uniformity in nature, not all the other attributes which I say that they do have. But I'm saying in a hypothetical world in which they don't have. So here's the problem, because now I have to imagine a hypothetical world in which something which is not hypothetically possible is possible, which is a contradiction itself. But I'm dying to know what your explanation or what your example is.
Okay, so there's a rather famous example in quantum mechanics. No, I'm not going to pretend I understand any of it.
Okay.
Where a particle can be both in a certain position and not in the same position.
Okay.
That would be if it's in position A and also not in position A. That's an example of a seeming contradiction.
That
nature.
Yeah, the way that you just described it does sound like a contradiction, and I'm with you. I've looked into it a little bit. I don't fully understand. My understanding is that it's not that it's one place and not in that same place in the same way at the same time. It's more like it's in two places at once. Now, I could be wrong about that, but for something to be in two places at once. What's that?
Yeah, that's just a distinction without a difference, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think so, because what you have to ask yourself is it true that it's in two places at once? And I would say, that still presupposes the law of logic, the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, and the law of excluded middle. So, I mean, again, to even have this conversation, we're presupposing that the laws of logic haven't changed since we started it. So the laws of logic are unchanging. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? Like, if you want to say that there's a particle that can be in two places at once, that's a really interesting phenomenon. I think that's really cool. Like the observer effect is really interesting, which I think that also supports biblical Christianity, by the way. But no, that doesn't violate the laws of logic, and that doesn't change any of the attributes of the laws of logic, which must be grounded in God.
I have another one if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, I think we've got a couple minutes.
It's also from physics, and I also don't understand it.
Time.
Oh, that's time. Philosopher, I got to let you go, man.
Right. Well, thanks for taking my call. I'm trying not to call in again because this is killing me.
Well, I'm very glad that you did. If you can resist the urge to join, then God help you and Godspeed. But and I mean that. But if you do give in to temptation and call in again, I'd look forward to talking with you again, because I'd love to hear what that other example is. Okay.
Right. Thanks. Well, good luck with the rest of the show.
Or a good day for you.
Yes.
And have a good one.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Here's a video that you should watch next. And if you really want to take your learning further, you need to know about the Hammer and Anvil Society, our premier discipleship community for Christian men. Learn more at thethink.institute/society. Until next time, I hope it made you think.